Hello everyone, I am the storyteller and I am here to help you today. I know you use this video to fall asleep, so before that, like the video and subscribe to the channel. Also, where are you from and what time are you watching? Now get comfortable and relax. I heard the loud bang against the wood and felt a jolt of adrenaline shoot through my body. That gate never budges when there's the slightest breeze, so a noise like that always gets my attention. I remember standing in the living room gripping my phone and thinking, this isn't normal. That's how it all started. Now every time I hear the slam, I brace myself for what I might find outside. It's not a big yard, and that wooden gate is just a few steps from my back door. Still, I hate walking over to it late at night, especially when the latch always ends up undone. I don't see anyone coming or going, but something is definitely messing with my gate. I've replaced the latch twice, and I'm no idiot about how a piece of hardware should line up. It's locked down right and it doesn't fail under normal conditions. Yet here I am, facing the same problem night after night. I remember the first time I noticed the latch undone. It was around midnight and I was dozing off on the couch. I had the TV on, volume low, and I heard a sharp crack. My heart started pounding. I live alone, so I have to check these things myself. There was no wind that night. It was summer, the air was still, and I had all my windows open to catch any breeze that might blow in. But there was nothing. When I went to the back door, I tried to look through the glass pane. It was dark though. I couldn't see much, just the outline of the fence and the big shape of my old wooden gate. It looked closed. Then I opened the door slowly, reached for the light switch on the outside fixture, and flicked it on. The gate was open. Not all the way, but enough that I could see the latch wasn't engaged. My heart sank a bit because I knew I had locked that thing earlier. I always do, especially at night. Yet it was undone. I walked up to the gate carefully, kind of holding my breath. I didn't know if someone was on the other side. My yard is fenced in, but the street is right beyond that fence. Anyone could be out there. I got close, put my hand on the gate, and felt the wood vibrating a little from the impact it must have had moments earlier. It wasn't swinging open in the wind, it just sat there, half open. I lifted the latch, tested it a few times, and it seemed fine. Solid even. No cracks, no missing screws. I peered around the gate into the alley on the other side. No one. No signs of movement. Everything was quiet. For a second, I listened to my own breathing, which felt too loud in that silence. I closed the gate, made sure the latch clicked, and headed inside. I double-checked it 3 more times before going to bed. I thought maybe it was some fluke. Maybe it hadn't caught properly when I locked it earlier. I didn't want to think about anything else that night. The next morning, I examined the latch in daylight. I made sure it was aligned. I used a screwdriver to tighten all the screws. I yanked it back and forth. It felt solid. Even if someone tried to open it from the outside, they'd usually have to lift the latch. It's the kind of latch that doesn't just flip up on its own. I felt a small knot in my stomach when I realized how unlikely it was to pop open by itself. Still, I told myself it was a random glitch. A few nights later, I heard the noise again. This time it was around 2 in the morning. I shot upright in bed because it sounded like someone kicked the gate. The wood made a loud, hollow thud. My heart started racing, and I was short of breath. I forced myself to get out of bed and walk to the back door. My hands were trembling a bit. I tried to be quiet so I could hear if anyone was moving around out there. I didn't hear footsteps, no rustling, nothing. Then I clicked the outside light and I saw the gate slightly open, the latch not hooked. I opened the door and stepped onto the porch. The night air felt weirdly still again. I called out, "Hello?" My voice was quiet and shaky. I waited. No one answered. I walked up and grabbed the gate, looking out into the street. No one was there. I noticed the alley lamp casting a dull light, but no shadows. Everything looked empty. I shut the gate, latched it firmly, then tested it with some strong pulls. It stayed put. I walked away, but as soon as I got inside, I had the urge to check it once more. Still locked. I tried to sleep, but I was restless. My mind kept churning with questions. Was someone messing with me? Did I have a faulty latch even though it felt sturdy? I convinced myself to let it go until morning. The next day I went to the hardware store, bought a brand new latch of a different design and replaced the old one completely. I made sure this new latch was more secure. I tested it in every possible way. It was tight. I felt a bit of relief, figuring that would fix the problem. That fix lasted about a week. Then I heard the noise again. This time it was late in the evening, right after I turned the lights out in the living room. I was about to head to bed. That loud, shocking slam made me freeze. My neck and shoulders tightened. I stood there, trying to convince myself I imagined it. But then I realized there was no wind. The air was calm, and that gate doesn't just fling open on its own. I made myself walk to the back door. My legs felt heavy. When I hit the outside light, I saw exactly what I expected. The gate half open, latch undone. There was a chill on my arms and the back of my neck. I wanted to throw up for a moment. I was just so unsettled. I couldn't ignore this anymore. I went outside and looked for footprints or any signs of tampering. I keep the yard pretty tidy, so I figured I'd see shoe prints in the dirt if someone had come in. I didn't see anything obvious. The latch itself had no scratches or marks. It looked brand new, which it was. I closed the gate, locked it, and then walked around the perimeter of my yard. There are thick wooden fences on the sides, and the only entry is through that gate or through my house. I didn't find any evidence of forced entry. The gate didn't look like anyone had messed with it. I cursed under my breath, feeling a wave of frustration and nervous energy. I started losing sleep over this. I'd lie in bed waiting for the banging sound. Some nights it didn't happen. I'd drift off, only to wake up suddenly, thinking I heard something. I'd rush out of bed, check the gate, and find it locked. Then I'd stand there in the dark, my heart pounding, scanning the yard for movement. Nothing. Other nights I'd hear that unmistakable crash of wood on wood. It felt like someone was messing with my head, but I never saw a person. I never saw an animal. I never found footprints or claw marks. I triple-checked the latch every time. It was always undone when I got there. I started flicking the lights on and off at random times, hoping to catch whoever was doing it by surprise. That didn't help. The pattern continued. I decided to set up a small motion-activated camera by the back door, aimed right at the gate. It was a simple camera with infrared night vision. I placed it where no one would spot it right away. I tested it during the day, and it worked fine. Then I waited. For a few nights I got nothing but normal footage. Just me walking around or a stray cat passing by, and the gate stayed locked. Then one night I heard the slam. I bolted up from the couch, feeling that rush of dread. I went outside, found the gate half open, same as always. I took a breath, tried to stay calm, and checked the camera's memory card. I expected to see someone messing with the latch, but the footage showed the gate. Then, out of nowhere, the camera glitched for a second. The gate moved. The latch was suddenly open. It was like a blink in the video. No figure, no shape, just the gate going from closed to open. There was a short static burst on the footage, and that was it. I watched that clip so many times, I lost count. I tried to spot anything unusual, a shadow, a reflection, a corner of a hand. Nothing. It looked like the camera froze for a fraction of a second, and then the gate was open. It freaked me out. I told myself the camera was cheap, and maybe it just malfunctioned. But it was enough to make me anxious every time night fell. I started feeling jumpy in my own home. I tightened every screw on that new latch. I even added a secondary lock, the kind that you can slide through a metal ring on the gate post. So there were now two locks, the latch and a bolt. I figured that if anything managed to open both, it had to be human, or something that could manipulate the locks. I tested them both multiple times. I would rattle the gate, pull on it, push. It didn't budge. For a few days I felt better. Then, on a night that felt impossibly quiet, I heard an even louder slam. It sounded like the gate got ripped out of my fence. I jumped up so fast I felt dizzy for a second. I grabbed my flashlight, ran to the back door, and flicked the outside light on. Sure enough, the gate was slightly ajar. The regular latch was undone. The bolt was pulled out of the ring. It didn't look forced. The bolt was just laid on the gate as if someone had gently lifted it and placed it aside. I felt a rush of blood to my face. I stood there, mouth open, scanning the darkness for movement. Nothing. I stepped out slowly, shining my flashlight into every corner of the yard. I checked the ground for footprints. Nothing obvious. The gate felt normal in my hands, no cracks or chips. I slammed it shut and locked it again with both methods, my chest tight and my breath shaky. I started thinking about whether I should stay awake all night, sitting by the window with the lights off, waiting for something. But the idea of actually seeing whatever was doing this made me feel a deep sense of dread. I don't like admitting that. I've never considered myself a fearful person, but something about that gate opening without any visible cause just messes with my head. My pulse races when I think about walking out there and catching someone in the act. I tried sharing this with a friend. He offered to come by and help me stake out my backyard one night. We sat in the dark for a few hours, eyes on the gate. The air was dead still. Nothing moved. Around 2 a.m, we started getting restless. We both started yawning. By 3, we were half asleep, so we gave up. The gate never opened that night, but the following evening, when I was alone, the latch popped right open. That bang on the wood happened again, loud and sudden. I cursed and rushed outside. Same scene. No wind, no intruder, just the gate undone. I tried tying it shut with a length of thick rope. I wrapped it tightly, knotted it 3 times, and left it overnight. Around 1 a.m, I heard the bang again. I thought, impossible. I raced out. The rope was completely loosened and coiled on the ground like someone had untied it carefully. The latch was open. My heart hammered in my chest. My arms tingled. I felt exposed. I looked around with my flashlight, half expecting to see someone standing there in the shadows. No one. After that, I became more paranoid. I started checking doors and windows inside my house. Nothing was out of place. I had trouble sleeping. My appetite got worse. Every little noise made me jump. Even the creak of the old wood floors would make me tense up. I felt alone and watched, even though I had no proof anyone was targeting me. It could have been some unexplainable trick, but I couldn't deny how specific it was. The gate always ended up undone, even though I used different locks and ropes. I haven't caught anyone in the act. Most nights I sit up, flicking my eyes toward the back window. Sometimes I consider opening the door fast and running out, hoping to catch whatever it is. But there's a heavy feeling in my gut when I picture that scenario. I think about stepping outside and seeing something that shouldn't be there. That thought makes my skin crawl. I don't want to see something unnatural, but I also want this to stop. I can't move. Not right now. This is my place. I've put work into it. The fence is in good shape, and that gate isn't cheap or flimsy. I've had latches on gates my whole life, and none ever acted this way. I don't want to invite trouble by telling too many people about it. My friend already thinks I'm missing something obvious, like a loose hinge or a bad alignment, but I've ruled those out. I've replaced the hardware more than once. It's not the wind either. Some nights are dead calm, and it still happens. Whatever is messing with that latch doesn't care about the locks I install. Some nights when the latch stays put and I don't hear anything, I wonder if it's over. Then it happens again. That single crash, as if someone shoved the gate. It's never a slow creak. It's always a harsh, sudden impact. Every time my breathing speeds up. My chest hurts a bit from the surge of adrenaline. My palms sweat. Then I walk out there, legs tense, eyes darting around, expecting to see something. The gate is half open. The latch is out of place. Everything else is quiet. The neighbors never mention hearing anything, and I don't feel comfortable bringing it up again. It feels like a personal battle now. I'm at the point where I just lock it, tie it, bolt it, and pray I won't hear that sound. But it keeps happening. I don't know if it's a person, an animal, or something else. I can't imagine an animal lifting a bolt that carefully or untying a rope. And a person would leave some trace behind, right? Wouldn't they show up on camera even for a second? Maybe they're too fast. Or maybe the camera doesn't capture them for some reason. I sometimes think about what would happen if I ran out at the exact moment the latch popped. The thought sends a chill through my back. I picture myself grabbing that gate and ripping it open, shining my flashlight into the alley, looking for a figure. Would I see a neighbor messing with me? Would I see a drifter? Or would I see nothing at all? Until I figure it out, I guess I'll keep dealing with it. I've tried everything. New latch, new bolts, rope, camera. Nothing explains how it happens, I just know it does. Sometimes the nights stay quiet, sometimes they don't. And every time I hear that loud bang, my heart pounds, and I end up standing there, flashlight in hand, staring at that open gate. Something is coming in. I just don't know what. I don't like thinking about what I'd do if I caught it. The idea of facing it makes my skin prickle and my stomach tighten. I can't shake that feeling, even when I'm just talking about it. It's enough to make me leave that gate alone until morning sometimes. But I never really sleep when I do that. This is my life now. A simple wooden gate with a sturdy latch that pops open for no clear reason, letting something enter my yard. I still don't have answers, and I'm not sure I want them, but that's the story. I can't pretend it isn't happening. I can't pretend I'm not worried about what I might see if I surprise it one night. All I can do is keep my guard up and hope nothing else crosses that threshold. If I ever decide to catch it in the act, I'll have to face whatever's on the other side of that gate. And that possibility is the one thing that keeps me from sleeping at night. I never thought I'd feel unsafe in my own hallway. That changed the night I noticed a shadow outside my apartment door. It wasn't a passing silhouette. It was there, motionless, right at 11:13 p.m. I didn't see a person's face or hear footsteps. I just saw this dark shape through my peephole like someone was standing there pressing close to my door. Then, when I opened it, the hallway was empty. I live on the third floor of a building with narrow corridors and dim lights. The bulbs in the hallway never fully illuminate the space. They cast weak light that creates dark corners. When I first moved in, I thought it was a small quirk of an old building. Sometimes the light flickers, but it's usually stable enough to see. At night, though, everything looks different. Shadows seem to crawl along the walls, and there's always that stale smell that lingers in poorly ventilated places. My apartment's front door faces the middle of the hallway, so I can see a decent stretch in both directions through the peephole, but the image is always slightly distorted. It was during a late-night check that I saw something that didn't make sense. I remember the first time it happened. I was on my couch half dozing when I noticed the time on my TV, 11:13 p.m. The building was quiet. I heard the occasional creak from the floor above me, but that's normal. Suddenly, I felt uneasy. It was like I sensed someone outside just standing there. I got up, walked to my door, and put my eye to the peephole. I saw a shape. It didn't move. It looked like a person's outline, but with the weak hallway light, I couldn't see any features. My pulse sped up. I stood there holding my breath, trying to see if the shape would shift. After a few seconds, I decided to open the door. The moment I did, the corridor looked empty. There was no place for someone to hide so quickly. The hallway is just a narrow path with doors on both sides, maybe 7 or 8 apartments on this floor. I stepped out, glanced around, saw nothing, and felt foolish. But it happened again the next night. Same time. I was more alert this time. I turned off my living room lights, hoping the darkness inside would help me see better through the peephole. At exactly 11:13 p.m., I felt that same strange awareness. I moved slowly to the door. My palms started sweating and the hair on the back of my neck stood up. Through the peephole, I saw the shape again. It was like a tall, dark outline, indistinct, but definitely there. My chest got tight and my heart pounded. I quietly unlocked the door, bracing myself to yank it open. I wanted to catch whoever was there off guard. I swung the door open quickly, stepping forward at the same time. But again, There was no one in the hallway. The lights flickered for a second, but aside from that, it was silent and empty. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was a trick of the eye. Maybe a shadow from some outside light source was reflecting weirdly. But my gut told me there was more to it. I decided to make a plan for the following night. I set my phone alarm for 11:12 p.m. so I could get ready. I took my phone, set it to record video, and placed it with the camera lens against the peephole. I stood there watching the screen. For a few seconds, it showed the dim hallway. Then, right on schedule, something dark appeared. My heart rate shot up. On my phone screen, I could see the silhouette. It stayed for maybe a second. Then the screen went blurry, almost like the camera lost focus. When the image cleared, the corridor was empty. I stopped the recording and played it back. The video was normal until 11:13 p.m. And then there was a 1-second segment that looked like a black smudge. After that, it was just an empty hallway again. No clear figure, no proof of a person. I tried a few different angles and lighting the next night. I turned on my hall light, left my phone balanced on a small table near the door, and angled it toward the peephole. Same result. The footage showed a blur for about a second, then nothing. It was frustrating. I felt like something was messing with me. I started checking the entire hallway after the shape disappeared. I looked down the stairwell, peeked around corners. Nobody was around, at least nobody I could see. The building's security cameras only covered the lobby and outside entrances. There's nothing pointed at my hallway, so I couldn't ask for help from building management. After several nights of this, I began to feel tired all day. My routine changed because I was up late every night dealing with this thing. I stopped sleeping well. My head felt fuzzy and I jumped at every little noise. Each time 11 p.m. came around, I'd start getting tense. I'd make sure all my lights were off, that I was ready with my phone or even my laptop's camera. But every time, the same outcome. A dark shape through the peephole, a moment of blurred video, then nothing in the hallway. One night, around 11:10 p.m., I decided to stand in the corridor before it appeared. I stepped outside, leaving my door slightly ajar so I wouldn't lock myself out. The hallway smelled musty, like old carpeting and stale air. The lights hummed. I took a spot against the wall, opposite my door, and stared at the corridor. I kept checking my phone's clock. At 11:12 p.m., nothing seemed out of place. At 11:13 p.m., the light at the far end of the hallway flickered. I felt a sudden chill. My breath caught in my throat. I didn't see a person, but I felt like something was right next to me. My arms got goosebumps. I actually felt my eyes tearing up from the surge of fear. I held my ground for maybe 10 seconds, but that invisible pressure on my chest was too strong. I retreated into my apartment, slamming the door. Once inside, I leaned against the door, breathing hard. I felt sweat running down my back. I waited a few minutes, checked the peephole, and it was the same story, a dark shape, then it vanished. The next day, I talked to my neighbor across the hall. His name is Luis. He's in his late 30s, usually friendly, but always busy. I asked if he'd noticed anything weird around 11:13 p.m. He looked at me like I was asking a strange question. He said he's usually asleep by then and hasn't heard anything unusual. I tried to explain the shadow, but he just shrugged. He offered to check the hallway with me that night, but then he got a phone call and had to leave for work. I didn't push the issue. I tried asking another neighbor, an older woman who lives a few doors down. She just gave me a polite smile and said she hadn't noticed anything. I felt alone. Nobody else seemed to share my experience. I tried to ignore it one night. I turned off my phone, turned up the volume on my TV, and tried to distract myself. But I couldn't stop checking the clock. Around 11:10 p.m., my heart was already pounding. By 11:13 p.m., I couldn't resist. I turned off the TV and crept to the door. I looked through the peephole. The shape was already there. This time, I didn't open the door. I just watched. My breathing got shallow and my eyes started to burn from not blinking. The shape seemed to stay for longer than usual. I checked my watch. The minute hand moved. Another minute passed. Still, it stayed. I I started shaking. My hands felt cold and my stomach churned. Suddenly, I heard a faint sound like a soft rasp against the door. It sent a shock through me. I yanked the door open. Again, the hallway was empty. My skin felt clammy, and I backed into my apartment, shutting the door with a loud bang. After that, the idea of catching it on camera became an obsession. I borrowed a friend's high-end camera with night vision capabilities. I thought maybe the phone camera wasn't sensitive enough to capture details. I set the new camera on a tripod in my living room, pointing it at the door. I left the door's security chain undone so I could whip it open faster. At 11 p.m., I got everything ready, made sure the memory card was set, and let the camera record. When 11:13 p.m. hit, I saw the shape through the peephole. I waited a few more seconds, feeling my pulse throbbing. Then I opened the door quickly, camera still rolling. The hallway was empty as usual. When I reviewed the footage, the hallway on film looked normal until the second I opened the door. Then there was a glitch, almost like static. The audio picked up the door opening, my breathing, and my footsteps outside. But visually there was a 1-second distortion, and then it showed me standing in an empty hallway. No shape, no person, just me. I felt my hands shaking as I watched it. The presence was always just out of reach. I started dreading nightfall. Each day felt slow, and each night filled me with dread. I developed a habit of pacing around the living room, looking at the time and flipping lights on and off, trying to find a better vantage point. I even tested turning on every light in my apartment to see if that helped. It didn't. The shape appeared at 11:13 p.m., whether my apartment was lit up or dark. I considered staying with a friend, but I didn't want to leave my apartment in case something happened when I wasn't there. I kept thinking, maybe I could catch it if I tried hard enough. One evening, I decided to take a different approach. I turned off all the lights in my apartment and in the hallway. There's a switch by the stairwell for the corridor light. The building's management rarely wants tenants to touch that switch, but I did it anyway. The hallway went dark except for the faint glow from the exit sign near the stairs. I stood in my doorway holding a flashlight. At 11:12 p.m., I felt my heart hammering. Then, at 11:13 p.m., something made the temperature drop. I felt a cool breeze on my arms, but there were no open windows or fans. I switched on my flashlight and swept it across the hallway. The beam shook because my hand was trembling. It illuminated the worn carpet, the chipped paint on the walls, the old apartment doors. I saw nothing else, but I still felt that presence, like something was inches away. My mouth went dry. I forced myself to walk down the hallway, shining the light in every direction. No one was there. When I checked the time, it was 11:14 p.m., and the feeling was gone. I turned the corridor lights back on, locked myself in my apartment, and tried to calm down by drinking water. My hand was still shaking as I lifted the glass. 1 week later, the pattern hadn't changed. I almost got used to that nightly tension, like a ritual I couldn't skip. At 11:13 p.m., I'd check the peephole, see the shadow, then I'd open the door to find nothing. The filming never worked. The shape never showed up in my recordings, just a blur or a glitch. I got used to sleeping late and my mornings were slow. I felt worn down. My eyes were sunken, and I avoided talking to neighbors because I knew they'd think I was losing it. Even my coworker asked if I was feeling sick because I looked so tired and on edge. One night I decided to ignore it. I told myself, just don't look. Pretend it's not there. I put on noise-canceling headphones and watched random videos online. My chest felt tight, but I tried to ignore it. At 11:13 p.m., I noticed my apartment lights flicker even though I was trying not to pay attention. My TV show glitched for a moment. The tension in my chest got worse, like I couldn't breathe properly. Finally, I couldn't take it. I ripped off my headphones and dashed to the door. Before looking through the peephole, I heard a slight scraping sound outside. It was like something dragging across the corridor floor. My hands were shaking so much I could barely grab the doorknob. When I opened the door, everything was quiet. No marks on the floor, nothing in sight. Now I'm stuck in this loop. Every night at 11:13 p.m., I see it. I feel it. The presence never tries to enter my apartment. It just stands there. I can't get rid of it. I can't record it properly. And I don't know what it wants. I only know that each time it appears, my body reacts with fear. My muscles tighten, my pulse throbs, and I feel cold sweat on my forehead. I can't make sense of it, and I can't prove it's real to anyone else. Yesterday, I actually looked around for new apartments. I'm not sure if moving away would solve this problem, but I'm starting to think about it seriously. The idea of staying here, dealing with this presence every night, is wearing me down. I'm scared it might escalate. I don't know how or why, but the thought creeps into my mind every time I look at the clock at night. For now, I'm planning to stay up again, watch the door, maybe try a different kind of camera, or see if I can get a friend to spend the night here with me. But nobody is eager to come over so late to investigate some phantom shadow. I'm alone in this. I'm writing this now to clear my head, to lay out the facts in simple terms. There's a shape in my hallway at 11:13 p.m. It shows up on my peephole, stands there without making a sound, and disappears when I open the door. Any recording device catches only a blur or glitch. I've tried everything I can think of, and none of it has worked. The tension is constant, and my body is exhausted. I just hope that at some point this thing gets bored and moves on, or that I find the courage to leave this building behind. Because right now this ritual is becoming my life, and I hate it. I stand here each night, waiting, heart pounding, trying to outsmart a shadow that always seems one step ahead of me. I never expected to feel so unsettled inside my own bedroom. A few months ago, I noticed a strange brown stain on my ceiling. It looked small at first, so I assumed it was a water leak or something like that. I tried to ignore it, but it started changing shape in a weird way. The outline began to resemble a human figure. It messed with my head because I couldn't explain it. No pipes run over that part of the ceiling. No moisture, no cracks, nothing. And then it vanished after a few days. That should have been the end of it. But it came back. Now I can't help feeling this heavy atmosphere whenever I lie down in bed. I've had experts check it out, and they found nothing. It's probably not a leak. Could it be something else? Part of me doesn't want to believe it's paranormal, but I'm out of logical explanations. That thought keeps me up at night. I live in a small apartment on the top floor. I've been here for a couple of years. It's not fancy. The building is old, but it's sturdy. The walls are thick, and there's usually no noise from neighbors. My bedroom is pretty basic. A bed, a dresser, a nightstand with a small lamp, and a closet. There's one window that faces another building. Not much of a view. The ceiling is off-white with a few hairline cracks here and there. It used to look normal. But one morning I woke up and saw this weird brown stain near the center of the ceiling. It wasn't big, maybe the size of my hand, but it stood out against the lighter paint. I got up, turned on the light, and squinted at it. It just looked like a dull, irregular blotch. I thought, great, another home repair I can't afford. I figured it had to be water damage from somewhere above me, but I'm on the top floor and there's no apartment upstairs, just the roof. I didn't see any sign of water dripping. The paint wasn't peeling. I touched the ceiling with a broom handle, expecting it to feel soft or damp, but it felt solid. I shrugged it off and went on with my day. A few nights later, I was reading in bed. I set the book down and glanced up. The stain had become a bit bigger. Or maybe it was just my imagination. I stood on the bed to get a closer look. It seemed like the edges had stretched out. It wasn't shaped like a circle anymore. It looked more angular, almost like a person's outline. I stepped down, grabbed my phone, and took a picture. The color was this muddy brown, lighter in some spots, darker in others. I didn't see any texture that looked wet. I tried to push up against the ceiling with my palm, still dry and firm. I felt uneasy. I told myself it was nothing, maybe the paint was just discoloring. But the following days, I kept staring at that spot. I told a coworker about it. He said, maybe it was mold. I bought some mold cleaner, climbed on a chair, and tried to scrub it. Nothing came off. The surface felt normal. The stain didn't budge. It just stayed there, dull and brown, with that faint outline. Then one morning, it was gone. Just gone. The ceiling looked exactly like it used to, without any trace of brown. I was so relieved. I thought maybe I'd overreacted. Maybe it was a trick of the light, or maybe something in the roof had caused a temporary patch of dampness that evaporated. I told myself not to think about it anymore. A few weeks later, I woke up in the middle of the night feeling this odd chill. My windows were closed, the heater was off, but the air felt heavy. It was hard to breathe. I switched on the lamp and looked around. The room seemed normal at first. Then I spotted something on the ceiling. My heart started thumping. That stain was back. It was bigger than before. This time I could clearly see a shape that looked like a torso and maybe shoulders. I felt my stomach twist. I rubbed my eyes, thinking I might be half asleep. But it was real. It had a distinct form, like a silhouette pressed into the paint. I turned on all the lights. I stood on my bed and my legs felt a bit shaky. I reached up and ran my fingers across the outline. It was cool to the touch, not warmer or colder than the rest of the ceiling, but it felt strange just knowing it was right above me. My mind raced. I stepped down and walked to the kitchen, trying to calm myself. I drank some water. My hands were trembling. After a few minutes, I forced myself to go back to bed. I kept the lights on. Eventually, I fell asleep out of pure exhaustion. The next day, I couldn't concentrate at work. I kept thinking about the stain. That evening, I called a plumber who specialized in leaks. He came over, used some detection device, checked all my pipes, turned on the faucets, flushed the toilet, everything. He said there was no evidence of any leak or moisture problem. He tested the walls, the ceiling, no trace of water. He shrugged and said maybe it was old paint. I asked him, "Have you ever seen something like this?" He said no, not exactly. He seemed puzzled, but he left without any answers. That night I lay in bed staring at the ceiling. I watched the stain. I don't know if it was just my eyes adjusting to the dark, but it seemed to expand when the lights were off. When I turned the lamp on, it looked smaller. I did this on and off for about an hour. Each time I flipped the light switch, I saw it go from larger to smaller. My chest felt tight. My mouth went dry. I had trouble swallowing. I couldn't deny something weird was happening. A few days later, the stain began to fade again. By the next morning, there was nothing there. The ceiling looked completely normal. I tried to relax. I even took a few photos when it was gone. No mark, no discoloration. It was like it never existed. But I couldn't shake the feeling of something lurking. That's when I started considering a paranormal explanation. I'm not a big believer in ghosts or spirits, but I couldn't think of anything else. The idea made my skin crawl, but it also gave me a strange sense of possibility. There had to be a reason for this. Then it happened for a third time. I was lying in bed, about to drift off, when I felt that same pressure in the air. It was like the room was thicker. My ears felt blocked. I turned on my side and looked at the ceiling. The stain was there again, right above me. It looked almost complete, like a full outline of a person. A head shape, broad shoulders, a slight taper where legs would be. No details, just a silhouette in muddy brown. My breath got shallow. I felt sweat on my forehead. My heart pounded in my chest. I pulled the covers up to my neck as if that would help. I stared at the shape and it seemed to pulse or shift gently. I turned on the lamp and it shrank a little. I started talking to it out loud. "What the hell are you? Why are you here?" I felt a little stupid, but I also felt desperate. I got out of bed and threw on some clothes. I left the apartment. It was past midnight. I drove around aimlessly for about 30 minutes just to get away. When I got back, I crept into my room. The stain was still there. I sat in the living room and fell asleep on the couch. In the morning, I checked the bedroom ceiling. It was smaller, but still there. I took more photos. I compared them on my phone to the old ones. It absolutely changed shape. It wasn't an illusion. I called a friend who's into weird stuff. He said he'd never heard of a haunted ceiling, but he believed me. He suggested I contact someone who deals with paranormal investigations, but that felt too extreme. I was nervous about having strangers in my apartment setting up equipment. Plus, I didn't even know if that would help. Over the next few nights, the stain kept changing size. It was always bigger when it was dark. During the day, or when I had the overhead light on, it shrank. I noticed that the feeling of heaviness came along with it every time. When it got bigger, I felt my chest tighten, and the air felt thick. Sometimes I heard a faint creaking sound, but I couldn't tell if it was the building settling or something else. I developed a pattern. I'd try to distract myself until I was exhausted. Then I'd turn off the lights and try to sleep. Whenever I caught a glimpse of that shape expanding, my heart rate would spike. I felt a pressure in my temples. My mind would race with questions. I kept thinking, is this a ghost? Is it just some phenomenon I don't understand? Is my ceiling rotting? Am I losing it? But every morning the shape was smaller again, like it was retreating from the daylight. After about 5 days of this, it vanished once more. I started noticing a cycle. It would appear for a few days, then disappear. Each time it came back, it seemed stronger. The outline got clearer, the presence felt heavier, and I couldn't rest. I'd snap awake at random hours, my pulse pounding. My blankets felt too warm, and I'd sweat through my pajamas. I got headaches. I kept checking the ceiling with a flashlight every few hours, even when it wasn't there. At work, I was distracted. My boss complained about my lack of focus. I didn't feel like explaining this whole ceiling story. People would think I was making it up or going nuts. I spent my lunch breaks on my phone, searching for any accounts of mysterious stains that looked like human figures. I found stories about water damage that formed shapes. I found claims of paranormal sightings. Nothing matched exactly what I was experiencing. That only made me more anxious. A month after the first time I saw the stain, it appeared again. The same routine. I noticed a small blotch forming on the ceiling one evening. By the next night, it had grown into that full silhouette. The air felt stale. My stomach turned. My hands shook. My eyes felt dry. I remember lying there, staring at the shape, counting the seconds, hoping it would fade. It didn't. I got up, paced around my apartment, and opened all the windows. No breeze, no relief. I tried to watch a stupid TV show to calm down. My mind kept wandering back to the bedroom. After an hour, I crept in to check. It seemed to move a little, maybe shifting a few inches, but I wasn't sure if that was real or if I was just tense. I decided to sleep on the couch again. Around 2 a.m., I woke up to a clanging noise from the pipes. That old building sometimes made random sounds, but this was loud. I got up, heart pounding, and walked to the bedroom door. I turned on the light. The stain was there, bigger than ever. It looked like it was about a foot longer than before, almost like it stretched from one side of the ceiling to the other. My head spun. I felt sweat trickle down my neck. I went back to the living room and sat with my head in my hands until I fell asleep. In the morning, I walked in with the sunlight pouring through the window, and the silhouette was much smaller. I took more pictures. I also noticed the paint looked normal on the rest of the ceiling. No cracks or peeling. No sign of water damage, just that same brown outline. I called the leak specialist again. He came and checked everything a second time. Still no leaks, no moisture. I started to think maybe I should just leave the apartment. But my lease wasn't up, and I didn't have money to break it. Plus, I was curious. A part of me wanted to see what this was. I hated that feeling of curiosity, but it was there. For a while, I tried ignoring it. When the stain was gone, I'd pretend nothing was wrong. I'd invite a friend over, order pizza, watch a movie. I wouldn't mention the ceiling. But at night, when I was alone, I'd feel the tension in my stomach. I'd keep an eye on the ceiling. Every small speck made me jump. Most nights it wouldn't appear. Then, every few weeks it would. And each time, the same heavy feeling crept into my room. I noticed I'd have trouble swallowing. My mouth would get dry. My fingers would twitch and I'd feel that sense of dread. I'd try to calm my breathing, but my heart would race no matter what. One time I tried throwing a tennis ball at it, like that would do anything. The ball hit the ceiling, dropped to the floor, and the shape stayed right there. I felt silly for doing that. Another time, I tried wiping it with a cloth. No effect. It just felt like normal ceiling. I even tried painting over it when it disappeared, just in case. But the next time it came back, it showed through the new paint. Now it's been several months, it still appears off and on. I've sort of accepted it. But I can't relax. Every night I walk into my bedroom with caution. When I don't see the stain, I feel relief. But I still wonder if it'll come back later. Sometimes I'll wake up at 3 in the morning, glance up, and see that shape. My pulse will hammer, and I'll feel my body tense up. Then by sunrise, it's faint again. I don't know if I'm dealing with something paranormal or if there's some bizarre natural cause. All I have are these weird shifting silhouettes on my ceiling, the heavy air when it appears, and the fact that no professional can explain it. I've double-checked the roof, the pipes, the paint. Everything is normal, except for that shape that shows up whenever it wants and then disappears like it was never there. I've stopped trying to rationalize it in detail. At this point, I just deal with it as it comes. I keep a flashlight next to my bed. When I see it growing, I turn on the light and watch it shrink. It helps me feel a little more in control. I still get that queasy feeling in my gut, and I still break out in a sweat sometimes. But at least I'm not running out of my apartment in the middle of the night anymore. I have no clue how long this will keep going. Maybe one day I'll move out, but I can't afford that right now. Every time the shape disappears for a stretch, I feel hopeful that maybe it's gone for good. And then I'll wake up at 2 in the morning with that weight in the air, look up, and there it is again. I wish I had a definitive ending to this story. I don't. I'm still living it. Right now, as I stand in my bedroom, the ceiling looks clear. But I know the next time that stain appears, I'll feel that chill, and my heart will race again. I might sleep on the couch or drive around until I calm down. That's my reality. I don't know if it's a ghost, a glitch in my building's structure, or my own mind messing with me. All I know is that the brown silhouette keeps showing up, and I can't find a single explanation that makes sense. I'm stuck with it. That's my life these days, and it's not something I can ignore anymore, no matter how much I try. I got home one night and dropped my keys on the kitchen table. I felt worn out. I stared at the single lamp glowing in the living room. My brother's phone line had been canceled a few months before, and I thought that chapter was closed. Yet there was this nagging feeling in my gut, something that made me uneasy. I needed to sit down. I needed to breathe. That's when it happened. My phone buzzed, and I glanced at the screen. The name on the notification wasn't a name. It was my brother's old number, and the message said, "You still have my fishing rod?" I felt my chest tighten. My arms stiffened. I stopped breathing for a few seconds. I checked the screen again to make sure I wasn't imagining things. The notification was still there, plain as day. The same phone number I'd canceled, the exact digits I'd called for years whenever I wanted to share something with him. The text was the kind of casual question he used to ask me all the time. It wasn't poetic. It wasn't dramatic. It was just him asking if I still had his fishing rod. And that's what shook me the most. It felt normal in a very abnormal moment. I swiped the screen to open my messages. The conversation thread didn't exist. There was no new message in my inbox. It was empty except for old texts from work and a few automated alerts. No message from that number. I felt my palms sweat. My hand shook a bit while I tapped around the phone's interface. Nothing. I locked the screen and unlocked it again. Still, there was no record of that text, but the notification had been there. I was certain of it. My heart was pounding, and I had to lean against the kitchen counter. I stood there for maybe a full minute, trying to figure out what to do next. I still felt that rush of adrenaline in my body. My arms felt weak. My knees were unsteady. I tried to breathe through my nose, slow and steady. I reminded myself that weird glitches can happen. People sometimes get old messages from nowhere, or phones randomly push old notifications. I'd read about stuff like that on tech forums, but my brother's line had been canceled. I remember calling the carrier and explaining the situation. I remember verifying the final bill. It was definitely shut down. I managed to calm down enough to think about the next step. I decided to open my phone app and try calling that number. Maybe someone else had it now. Maybe the carrier reassigned it to a new customer, and it was some messed up coincidence or a prank. I opened the dialer and typed in the digits. I recognized each one. Before I pressed the call button, I paused. My thumb hovered over the screen. My chest felt heavy again. I felt a sort of anxiety in my throat. But I pressed the button. The call rang once. It rang twice. Then it cut off, like a busy signal, but not exactly. I heard a weird beep, then silence. I checked the phone screen. It showed call ended. I tried again. The same thing happened. 2 rings, then a short beep, then nothing. No voicemail greeting, no automated message telling me the line was disconnected. I tried a 3rd time. Same result. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the counter. My stomach felt knotted. I locked my phone again. I looked around the apartment. It felt too quiet. The living room lamp cast a weak, yellowish light, and the corners were dark. The air conditioner hummed, but there was no other sound. My heart was still thumping, and I noticed my shirt felt damp under my arms. I swallowed hard. I considered texting back. That message on my lock screen had a reply option. Maybe I could try a direct response. I unlocked the phone and tapped out. Who is this? Simple and straightforward. I pressed send. It showed the little spinning circle for a second. Then it said, message not sent. Tap to retry. My phone had good signal. I saw 4 bars of coverage, so there was no reason for the message to fail. I tapped to retry. Same result. Message not sent. I took a screenshot of my phone just in case I needed proof later. I tried a different approach. I went into the Contacts app, tapped New Contact, and typed in that number. I pressed Save. The phone let me save it, so now it was in my contact list. I tried texting again through that contact. The text wouldn't go through. I felt a chill in my arms and I rubbed them with my hands. The hairs on my neck were standing up. I set my phone down and leaned back on the counter. My mind was racing with questions. I thought about some random person messing with me, but it made no sense. How would they know about the fishing rod? That was something my brother always asked about, especially after our last fishing trip. He left that rod at my place a long time ago. He'd tease me about it, act like I stole it or that I should take it out on the lake. No one else had that exact memory with me. It was just between the 2 of us. After a few minutes, I decided to double-check the phone plan situation. I walked to my desk in the corner of the living room. I had a file folder with old bills and documents. I flicked on a small desk lamp and started looking for the phone bill from my brother's account. My hands were still shaky, and I felt a strain in my lower back from bending over the drawer. I flipped through my papers until I found the final statement from the carrier. It was stamped, canceled. The date matched what I remembered, so the line was officially done. I dialed the carrier's customer service number. It was late, but they had a 24-hour line. I waited on hold, listening to that scratchy hold music. Eventually, a representative picked up. I explained the situation. I said I got a text from a canceled line. I gave the canceled number. The representative asked for verification details. I provided the old account number. I gave the representative my brother's name. I tried to keep my voice steady, but I felt uneasy. The rep clicked around on a computer system for a bit. Eventually, she told me the line was not only canceled, but it hadn't been reassigned. Nobody should be able to use that number. She sounded a little confused. She asked if I might have the number saved incorrectly, or if I had an older text that got re-notified. I said that might be possible, but it still didn't explain the question about the fishing rod. There was a pause. She told me there was nothing else on their end that she could see. Then she asked if I needed anything else. I told her no, thanked her, and hung up. The call didn't give me any answers, and I felt my head throbbing. I shut the desk drawer and tossed the phone bill folder back inside. Then I slid into my desk chair. My heart rate was starting to slow, but I still felt this tightness in my chest. I tried to think rationally. It could have been some weird glitch. Maybe an old text from before the line got canceled was stuck in some system and it came through now. But the mention of the fishing rod was exactly what he used to say in casual conversation. I rubbed my temples. My mouth was dry, so I walked to the kitchen and grabbed a bottle of water from the fridge. I took a long drink and felt the cold liquid run down my throat. That sensation grounded me for a second. I went back to my living room and collapsed onto the couch. I looked at my phone again. I checked for any new notifications. There was nothing. I scrolled through my messaging app. The text still didn't appear in the conversation list. Only the screenshot I took was proof that it had ever appeared. I stared at that screenshot. The words, "You still have my fishing rod?" were in that small bubble. The timestamp was from about 20 minutes ago. There was no name, just the old phone number. I zoomed in on the screenshot, looking at each digit. It was definitely his number. I turned on the TV for background noise. I put on some random show, but I wasn't watching it. The voices in the background made the apartment feel less isolating. My body still felt tense. My shoulders were stiff. My legs felt restless. I thought about texting a friend or calling someone to tell them about this, but I didn't know where to start. It sounded ridiculous. It felt strange to even consider that something beyond a glitch had happened. Yet part of me couldn't ignore the details. My friend Tim knew about the fishing rod, but that was because I mentioned it in passing once. Would he pull a prank like that? It seemed too cruel. I scrolled through my contacts, thinking of who might have the motive or the knowledge. Everyone I knew was either close enough to understand it was a sensitive topic, or they were too distant to even think about it. I locked my phone again. I realized my foot was tapping anxiously on the floor, so I stood up and paced around the living room. The tension in my stomach hadn't gone away. My breathing was shallow. I felt like something was off. I looked at the window, checking if maybe I forgot to close the blinds. They were shut, and the city lights outside gave off a faint glow around the edges. Eventually, I decided to go find that fishing rod. It was stored in my closet. If the question was out there, I wanted to see the object. I thought maybe it would help me feel more grounded. So I walked to my bedroom, opened the closet, and pulled out a large plastic bin. I set it on the floor. I felt a dull ache in my knees as I crouched down. I popped the lid off the bin. Right on top was the fishing rod case. I lifted it out and unzipped it halfway. The rod was inside, in two pieces. I touched it. It felt smooth and cold. I closed the case and rested it against the wall. I stared at it for a good minute. Memories tried to bubble up, but I pushed them away. I didn't want to dwell on the past. I picked the rod up, carried it back to the living room, and leaned it in the corner. I sat on the couch and looked at it from a distance. My phone was next to me, silent and still. The TV was playing some late-night infomercial, but I kept the volume low. I wondered if the phone would buzz again. My eyes kept shifting to it every few seconds. Time passed, maybe half an hour or more. I sat there, not sure what to do. The phone didn't vibrate. I tried sending another text, this time from my messaging app to that saved contact. Again it said, "Message not sent." I tapped it to retry. No luck. I sighed and put the phone down. My heart rate had calmed, but I felt a headache creeping in, and my eyes were tired. I decided I would power my phone off and power it on again. Maybe that would clear any weird glitch. I held the side button, slid to power off, and waited for the screen to go dark. Then I pressed the button again until the Apple logo lit up. Once it booted, I entered my passcode. No new messages. The notification about the fishing rod was gone, except for the screenshot. Everything felt normal now. I got up and walked to the kitchen. I opened a drawer and grabbed a small flashlight. Sometimes when I'm restless, I organize things around the apartment. I decided to check the fuse box in the hallway closet just to distract myself. I aimed the flashlight around, making sure everything looked in place. Then I closed it. I put the flashlight on a shelf. I took a moment to stand in the hallway staring at the wall. My mind was still caught in a loop about the text. I felt my heart picking up again, so I forced myself to take slow, deliberate breaths. In through my nose, out through my mouth. I walked back to the living room and switched off the TV. The silence felt thick. The lamp cast the same dim light on the couch, the coffee table, and the fishing rod in the corner. I could hear the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. My phone was on the couch cushion where I left it. I picked it up, turned it on, and stared at the screen. Part of me hoped a new text would appear to give me some clarity. Nothing happened. It stayed silent. I opened the screenshot again, looked at the text one more time, then closed the photo gallery. I decided to put the phone face down on the table. I felt that tension in my neck, that tightness behind my eyes. My shoulders ached. I sat down and rubbed my face with my hands. I stayed like that for a while, elbows on my knees, trying to relax. Eventually, I realized how late it was. I needed to get some rest. But I knew sleeping wouldn't be easy. My mind was buzzing. Before I headed to bed, I picked up the fishing rod and carried it back to my bedroom closet. I placed it back in the bin and closed the lid. Then I walked around the apartment, double-checking the door locks and turning off the lights. The sense of unease lingered, but I couldn't do anything else about it. I knew I would probably spend the next day calling the phone company again or searching online for an explanation. But that night, all I could do was try to sleep. When I finally lay down, I felt my legs tremble a bit, probably from the adrenaline wearing off. I pulled the covers over me and stared at the dark ceiling. The phone was on my nightstand, silent. I felt my throat tighten and my eyes sting, but I blinked the feeling away. My pulse slowed, my breathing steadied. I thought about the text one more time. "You still have my fishing rod?" That was all it said. I had no answers. I just stayed there in the dark, listening to my own breathing. Eventually, my exhaustion got the better of me and I drifted off. The phone never buzzed again that night. I got home last March and saw the rocking chair moving on its own. It was a slow, steady motion, almost like someone had just gotten up. I stopped at the doorway and stared at it. My chest tightened. My hands felt cold. My mouth went dry. That chair belonged to my father. He used to sit there around dusk, smoking a cigar and staring out the window. He was gone now. I kept the chair in the living room, right next to the window. I never planned to get rid of it because it reminded me of him, but I didn't expect it to start rocking by itself. When I walked in, I thought there might be a draft. My house is old, and sometimes the windows don't shut properly. I put my bag on the floor and closed the door behind me. I stood still for a moment. I didn't hear any wind. The windows were closed. The air felt stale and heavy. I took a few steps toward the chair. The wooden floor creaked under my shoes. The chair kept moving for a few more seconds and then stopped. My heart pounded. I rested my hand on the back of the chair. It was warm, as if someone had been sitting there. I glanced around, but I didn't see anything unusual. I felt a little silly, so I tried to calm down. I shrugged it off and went to the kitchen to make some coffee. That night, I replayed it in my head. I sat on the couch and kept glancing at the rocking chair. It didn't move again. I told myself it was a breeze or something I'd knocked loose when I walked in. I still felt uneasy. It wasn't just that it moved. It was how it moved. It looked gentle, like it was pushed from behind by someone who stood up carefully. My mind lingered on that thought until I went to bed. A few months later, I came home on another important date. That date mattered to me because it was the day my father got promoted a long time ago. We always treated it like a special occasion. My father used to say it changed his life. I never really thought about that day much after he was gone, but that evening I remembered. I walked into the living room, feeling a little down about the past. I flipped on the light and froze in place. The rocking chair was moving again. This time it moved more slowly, barely swaying back and forth. My pulse kicked up. I set my keys on the table next to the door. My legs felt stiff. I took a step forward and heard the floor creak. The chair kept moving. I walked over to the window and placed my hand near the frame. No wind came through. I looked up at the ceiling fan. It was turned off. The chair kept rocking and I stood there watching it. I didn't want to look away. I wanted proof that something strange was going on. I pulled out my phone and tried to record a video. I saw the rocking motion on the screen, but it looked weaker. It looked like a tiny movement caused by a small draft. I felt a jolt of frustration. In person, I could see it was more than just a slight sway. It was a distinct motion, like a person had just stood up and walked away. But on the phone, it looked so minimal, like barely anything was happening. I stopped recording. My hands were shaking. I didn't know how to explain it. I grabbed the chair's arm and stopped it from moving. Then I let go. It stayed still. I couldn't sleep that night. My heart thumped in my ears when I tried to close my eyes. I got up a few times to check the living room. The chair never moved while I was looking at it. Around 3 a.m., I decided to sit in it. That was the first time I'd done that since I brought it into my house. I felt uneasy about it, like I was intruding. The wood creaked under my weight. I leaned back and stared at the dark room. I could smell a faint cigar scent, probably from all the times he sat in it, though I never noticed it before. My eyes started to sting, so I closed them. I remembered him sitting there every evening, especially when I got home from work. We never had long talks, but he'd nod at me and keep smoking. I tried not to think too hard about it. After a few minutes, I got up, went back to my bed, and finally drifted off. Over the next few weeks, nothing happened. The chair stayed still whenever I was around. I didn't feel anything strange. It felt like my life had gone back to normal. Then my father's birthday came. It was a day I usually spent remembering him. Sometimes I'd look at old photos or watch some sports program he used to like. That night I got home late from work. I was tired and didn't feel like cooking, so I grabbed some leftovers from the fridge and went to the living room. The moment I flipped on the lights, I felt my stomach drop. The chair was rocking again. This time it was a little faster. The backrest was leaning forward, then leaning back. The seat made a slight squeak every time it moved. I stood there, holding my food in one hand. I felt sweat forming on my forehead. My legs felt tense. I set my plate on the coffee table. I turned on my phone's camera again. Through the screen, the motion looked less noticeable. It was still there, but it looked like it could be explained away by an air current. I felt frustrated and scared at the same time. I took a deep breath and approached the chair. My hands trembled. I reached out and touched the backrest. It felt solid, but it wasn't cold or warm. I held it still and then released it. The rocking continued on its own for a few seconds, then gradually came to a stop. I couldn't stand feeling so unsure. I decided to run some tests. I opened the windows to see how the wind would affect it. When I opened them wide, the chair barely moved. I turned on the ceiling fan. It made the curtains sway a bit, but the chair didn't move enough to match what I'd seen before. I got a small level from my toolbox and checked the floor around the chair. It was perfectly flat. I realized none of these things explained the motion. I felt a chill down my neck. I left the house that evening and went for a walk. I needed some air. As I walked, I kept thinking about how the chair only moved on days that mattered to my father or to me. I thought about his promotion day, his birthday, and other days that had some connection to his life. It wasn't random. It felt like it meant something. I came back home after about an hour. The chair was still. I went straight to my bedroom and lay down. I stared at the ceiling. My mind raced with thoughts about him. I was uneasy, but part of me felt a hint of comfort, like maybe he was visiting. I shook off that idea because it sounded too strange to accept. I wasn't a big believer in anything beyond what I could see. I fell asleep and had restless dreams about coming home and seeing him in that chair. Over the next several months, it happened a few more times. Each time I noticed it was on a specific date. One was the day he bought his first car. Another was the day he came home from a big trip. I recognized the pattern. I tried to ignore it. It was too unsettling. But each time I felt the same physical response. My heart would race, and my arms would break out in goosebumps. My chest felt tight. I'd try to slow my breathing. I hated feeling that adrenaline rush in my own home. One day I decided to invite a friend over. I wanted someone else to see the chair. I told him everything. He looked at me like I was imagining things. But he agreed to come by on a date I expected it might happen. The anniversary of my father's big sports victory from years back. My friend arrived in the evening, around the same time I usually noticed the chair moving. We sat in the living room, eating pizza. Nothing happened for an hour, so I relaxed. I thought maybe this time it wouldn't happen. Then I got up to get some drinks from the kitchen. When I returned, the chair was moving. My friend stood there with his eyes wide, staring at it. He turned to me and said it had started rocking about 10 seconds after I left the room. I felt a jolt go through my body. I noticed my friend's hands were shaking. We both approached the chair. My friend tried to record it on his phone, but again on the screen it looked weak and not convincing. In person it was very clear. It rocked with a purpose. My friend said he had no idea what could cause that. We checked the windows, the fan, and everything else. Nothing explained it. My friend left that night looking pale and uneasy. After that, I couldn't ignore it. I started marking down the days it happened on a calendar. Each date had some link to my father. Sometimes it was obvious, like his birthday. Other times it was less obvious, like the day he fixed the fence in the backyard a long time ago. I remembered that date because it was a big project he was proud of. Apparently, that day mattered enough for the chair to move. I tried to see if there was some random logic to it, but it always came back to something about him. I spent more time in the living room waiting to see if I could catch the moment it started. Usually it happened when I wasn't looking or when I stepped out of the room. Once I thought I saw it begin to move in my peripheral vision, but when I turned my head, it was already in motion. Sometimes I heard a soft creaking sound just before I noticed it. It was like hearing floorboards shift under someone's weight. One evening, I stood right in front of the chair on another anniversary. I kept my eyes fixed on it. My arms were crossed and I tapped my foot on the floor. My heart pounded. I wanted to see if it would move while I watched. My phone was in my hand, ready to record. For almost an hour, nothing happened. Then my phone buzzed with a text. I looked down for a second. I heard a soft creak. I looked back up. The chair was rocking. I let out a shaky breath and started recording. As before, the video just showed a faint movement. In real life, the chair rocked with more force. I cursed under my breath and stopped recording. I grabbed the chair's armrest. I held it for a few seconds. My arm felt tense. I released my grip. The chair gave a final sway and went still. I felt drained. Every time this happened, my body reacted with a rush of nervous energy. My legs felt weak. My palms got sweaty. My mind raced in circles trying to find an explanation. I started keeping the lights on more often. I had trouble sleeping. I was always on alert, expecting to hear the chair creaking. Last month, I sat on my couch late at night. My lights were dim, and I was scrolling through my phone. I glanced at the calendar and realized the next day was the date my father and I once took a trip together. I felt my heart rate go up. I didn't want to see the chair move again. I decided to go to bed early, hoping to sleep through it. But around 10 p.m., I heard that soft creaking from the living room. I froze. My muscles tensed. My throat felt tight. I didn't want to go in there, but I forced myself. I walked into the living room. The chair was rocking in the dark. It looked so clear in the faint light coming from the hallway. It wasn't a small sway. It was a back and forth motion like someone was sitting in it and pushing off with their feet. My mouth felt dry. I stepped closer. The chair kept going. I didn't record it this time, I just stood there. I watched it rock for a minute or two. Then it slowed down until it stopped. I let out a breath I didn't realize I was holding. My shirt felt damp with sweat. I turned on all the lights and sat on the couch trying to calm down. I felt my pulse in my ears. My mind was blank except for the sound of my own breathing. After a while, I got up and walked around the house, checking windows, doors, and anything else that could explain it. I found nothing. That night, I barely slept. Now I expect it. When a meaningful date approaches, I come home with my stomach in knots. I open the door slowly. My breath catches in my throat. I look at the chair. Sometimes it's moving. Sometimes it's still, and it starts moving later. I've stopped trying to record it. I've stopped trying to explain it. I just watch, hold my breath, and wait until it stops. It never does any harm. It just seems to move. Then it goes still again. I get the feeling it's connected to him. I don't say that out loud. I don't talk to people about it anymore. But it hasn't stopped. And it only happens on those special dates. That's my reality. I keep the chair in the same spot, by the window. I don't sit in it anymore. I keep a distance from it most days. Sometimes I'll stand in front of it and wonder if it will move. Usually it doesn't. But on those nights, the nights that matter, it rocks on its own. It feels personal and unsettling. My heart still pounds every single time. My hands get cold. My thoughts rush. Then it ends. I let out a breath. I wipe the sweat from my forehead, and I try to relax. That's all I've got. I still live in the same house. The chair is still there. It still moves on those dates. I've grown used to it, even though it makes my body tense up every time. I guess I just accept it now. There's no big conclusion. There's no explanation I've found. It just happens. I come home and sometimes the chair is rocking gently like someone just stood up from it. And that's it. I'm left there, breathing hard, staring at it, waiting for it to stop. I've lived on this street for about 4 years and I've never had any real trouble. It's quiet with only a few houses on each side and a lot of gaps where the streetlights barely reach. I liked that peaceful vibe at first, but then something weird started happening. Around 2 or 3 in the morning, I kept hearing this faint trim like a bicycle bell, moving past my house at a slow pace. It sounded steady, like someone casually pedaling right along the sidewalk. But every time I looked out my window, I saw nothing. No shadow, no outline, and definitely no bike. The first time I noticed it, I thought I was dreaming. I remember lying in bed, half asleep, when my ears picked up that gentle ringing. It wasn't loud, but it had a distinct 2-note pattern. Trim, followed by a pause. Then it repeated once or twice before fading away. I blinked a few times, tried to focus, and I realized I was actually awake. My bedroom window was cracked open because it was a warm night. I got up, walked over to the window, and looked down at the street. The sidewalk looked empty. No movement. Nothing. The bell was gone too. I shook my head, thinking maybe some passing cyclist had come by, but I couldn't figure out why they'd be out there at that hour. My block isn't the best lit place, and it's uncommon to see anyone riding a bike around 2 in the morning unless they're heading home from a late shift. But I saw no headlights, no reflective gear, nothing. I stood there for a minute waiting to see if anyone would pop into view. The street was still and mostly dark except for a faint orange glow from a street lamp at the far corner. After a while, I went back to bed. For the next few days, I forgot about it. Life went on normally. I work from home, so I usually stay up late. I handle some freelance projects, and sometimes I'm still typing away at midnight. About a week after that first incident, I heard the bell again. This time, I was in my living room, seated on the couch, finishing up an email. My laptop was on the coffee table and the TV was on mute. The moment I heard trim trim, my head snapped toward the front window. I set my laptop aside, jumped up, and rushed to the window. I pressed my forehead against the glass. Nothing. The sound lingered for a second, then disappeared. I walked to the front door, opened it slowly, and stepped onto my small porch. The night air felt cool on my face. I glanced down both sides of the street. I didn't see anyone. I listened carefully, hoping for another ring, but there was just the buzz of a distant air conditioner or maybe a power line. It's always quiet around here after midnight, so any small sound stands out. But I heard nothing else. I stood there for a minute, feeling a mild sense of unease. I'm not used to hearing things outside at that hour. When I realized there was no more noise, I went back inside and tried to shake it off. But I couldn't relax. I kept glancing at the windows, wondering if whoever was riding that bike would loop around again. A couple of nights later, the same thing happened, and it started to become a pattern. The ringing usually came at around 2 or 3 in the morning. It was never very loud, but it was always that same double ring. I would freeze, listen, and then scramble to see who was out there, but every time the street was empty. I began to feel frustrated. I found myself staying up to see if it would happen again. I'd keep my lights off, hoping I could catch a glimpse of movement on the sidewalk, but I never did. One night I decided to sit on my dark porch around that time. I turned off all the indoor lights so there was no glow behind me. I pulled a chair close to the door and sat quietly, scanning the street. After about an hour, I started drifting off, my eyes getting heavy. Then I heard the bell. My heart pounded, and I leaned forward. The sound was faint. Trim trim. I focused on the sidewalk in front of my house. I saw no shape, no outline of anyone pedaling by. I craned my neck to look further up the block. The ringing continued, but it seemed to be moving away. I jogged to the end of my short driveway, expecting to see a rider under the dim streetlight at the next corner, but I spotted nothing. The pavement was empty, the shadows still. The ringing faded. I felt a prickling on my neck. I knew I had heard it. I just couldn't explain why there was no one there. I tried telling a friend about it the next day. He laughed and said, maybe some local night owl was riding a bike without headlights. But that didn't explain why I couldn't see a silhouette or any reflective detail. Even in low light, I should have seen some shape moving. I tested it one night by riding my own bike on the same sidewalk at around 11 p.m. I had no lights on my bike, but you could still see my figure or at least sense movement if you looked directly at me. Yet whenever I heard this trim trim, there was absolutely nothing to look at. One night I actually thought I saw a tiny flicker, like a small flashlight beam near the curb. It moved slowly, like someone was pointing a narrow beam at the ground while riding. I was in the kitchen grabbing a glass of water when the bell chimed again. I rushed to my front window and saw a faint line of light dancing across the pavement. It jerked around, as if it was attached to someone's hand on a handlebar. My heart raced. I decided to go outside again, but by the time I opened my front door, the beam had vanished and the bell stopped. I hurried to the edge of the sidewalk, trying to catch any sign of someone. But the street was empty. I felt a wave of goosebumps on my arms. That experience rattled me more than the others. Now I had seen something, even if it was just for a second. It meant there was a physical object out there, or at least some source of light. I started to worry that maybe someone was playing a trick on me. I don't have any known enemies, and I usually mind my own business. But it crossed my mind that maybe someone was messing with me, trying to freak me out. I considered setting up a camera on my porch, aiming it at the street. Maybe I'd catch a figure on video. But I hesitated because that felt too paranoid. Also, I wasn't sure if it would even pick up something in the darkness. Most home security cameras need a decent light source to show detail. After a few more nights of hearing the bell, I decided I had to do something. The interruptions were affecting my sleep and making me uneasy at night. So I drove to a hardware store and bought a decent motion-activated spotlight. I installed it above my porch, angling it so it would cover the sidewalk and part of the street in front of my house. The installation took me a couple of hours. I tested it by walking around at night, and it lit up whenever I stepped into the sensor's range. I hoped that if the cyclist came by, the spotlight would flick on, and I'd finally see who it was. The first night with the new spotlight, I stayed up again, watching through a gap in my curtains. Around 2:15 a.m., I heard the bell. Trim, trim. I tensed up, stared at my porch light, waiting for it to flare on. It stayed dark. I felt a tightness in my chest. How could it not detect movement? The bell sounded like it was right in front of my house. I inched closer to the window, trying not to blink. Another soft trim, trim, and then silence. The spotlight never activated. After a few seconds, I rushed outside. I stood under the sensor, and it clicked on, flooding the sidewalk with bright light. The moment it did, I saw an empty street. No bike, no person. I tried walking up and down the block, shining my phone's flashlight into every corner. Nothing. The houses next door were dark. Nobody was outside. It was just me. I felt a chill on my skin. I turned back to my house, locked the door behind me, and paced around the living room. My heartbeat thumped in my ears. I couldn't think of a rational explanation. If someone was outside on a bike, the spotlight should have caught them. Yet it didn't. For the next week, the same pattern continued. Some nights I'd hear the bell 2 or 3 times. Other nights there would be only a single ring. Each time the spotlight stayed off, and I'd see nothing when I looked out. My frustration turned into a kind of numb acceptance. I started wearing earplugs to bed because I couldn't handle jumping up every night. But the earplugs weren't perfect. Sometimes I still heard the faint bell through them. One evening, I felt determined to catch the source of that sound once and for all. I took a flashlight, put on a dark hoodie, and decided to wait outside near the edge of my property, behind a short row of hedges. I crouched there around 1:45 a.m., feeling the rough ground on my knees. I kept the flashlight off to avoid giving myself away. My plan was to pop up as soon as I heard the bell and point my flashlight at whoever was riding by. It was quiet for a long time. I started feeling the strain in my legs. My back ached a bit from leaning forward, but I stayed focused. Then, at around 2:30 a.m., I heard it again. Trim, trim. My heart pounded. The sound was close, but I couldn't see anything on the sidewalk. I gripped my flashlight and waited. Another ring echoed softly. I stood up in one swift motion and flicked my flashlight on, aiming at the sidewalk in front of me. I moved it left, right, up, down. The beam illuminated the concrete, a parked car, and parts of my neighbor's front yard. Nothing else, no movement, no wheels turning. I felt my hands shaking as I lowered the flashlight. I took a step onto the sidewalk, listening. My breath was shallow and my heart hammered. I walked a few paces forward, scanning the street for any shape that could be hiding in the dark. The air smelled damp, and I felt a slight breeze. The quietness felt heavy. I stayed out there for several minutes, but the bell didn't ring again. Finally, I gave up and went back inside. I locked the door and leaned against it, feeling a surge of adrenaline drain from my body. At that point, I considered calling the police, but I knew what they'd say. They'd probably come out, shine a flashlight around, find nothing, and tell me they couldn't do much unless I had more concrete evidence. I didn't want the hassle, and I wasn't in danger, at least not physically. No one was threatening me directly. It was just the bell, over and over. I started to think maybe I was stuck in some weird cycle. Maybe I should just ignore it and go about my life. But it was hard to ignore something that woke me up at random hours. I tried sleeping with a white noise machine. It helped a little. Some nights I wouldn't notice the bell at all. Other nights it still got through the noise. And whenever I heard it, my pulse would spike and I'd feel the same dread, the same confusion. One afternoon, I spoke to a neighbor across the street. I didn't mention the bell. I just asked if he'd seen anyone riding a bike at odd hours. He gave me a puzzled look and said he hadn't noticed anything unusual. He told me it was pretty dead around here after midnight. That was it. No one else seemed to hear or see anything. That made me feel more isolated. I began to keep it to myself. Even now, I still hear the bell sometimes. It hasn't gone away, and I haven't figured out who or what causes it. I keep my curtains drawn at night, but I can't help peeking through them when the ringing starts. I never see any shape or movement. The old motion spotlight is still up there, and it never clicks on when the bell sounds. The weird beam of light I once saw hasn't shown up again. I keep telling myself it's some kind of mechanical malfunction or an echo from somewhere else, but that doesn't line up with the actual location of the sound. It's always right there, as if someone is moving along the sidewalk in front of my house. I don't know how long this will keep happening. I don't have a plan to make it stop. I guess I've learned to live with it, even though it still makes my heart race at night. Sometimes I open my window just a crack, hoping to catch that sound again to prove I'm not losing it. I sit there in the darkness, listening for that slow, deliberate trim. It usually arrives when I'm not expecting it. It reminds me that there are things I can't pin down no matter how hard I try. After months of hearing it, I've stopped running to the sidewalk. I just listen. I look out the window and I see nothing, but I still hear the bell. Then it fades. Then the street is quiet again. And that's it. That's the whole situation. I live on a quiet street with poor lighting, and around 2 or 3 in the morning, an unseen cyclist, or something, passes by, ringing a bell. I can't see it, I can't catch it, and I can't make sense of it. I wish I had some neat conclusion, but I don't. It's just what happens here, night after night, without explanation. For now, I just wait for the next time, hoping one day I'll throw open the door and see a real, tangible person there. But so far, there's nothing to see except an empty sidewalk and an echo of that bell in my ears. I woke up on Monday feeling a knot in my gut. I couldn't ignore the tension anymore. Every morning for the last few weeks, I'd open the door to my office and find my desk drawer unlocked. Papers would be all over the place, but nothing was ever missing. It wasn't logical. There was no sign of forced entry, and I always locked that drawer before leaving. I was tired of feeling like an idiot. I was done suspecting random people. Something was off, and I needed to find out what was happening. My name's Rick. I'm in my mid-30s, and I work in an administrative office that handles sensitive documents. I have a standard metal desk with 3 drawers on one side. The bottom drawer is deeper and has a lock. That's where I keep the more confidential paperwork. It's mostly contracts, proposals, and some personal notes. Nobody else should have access to them, so I keep a key with me at all times. My boss and coworkers respect privacy, or so I thought. The first time I noticed the drawer unlocked, I figured I must have been careless. I thought maybe I was in a rush and didn't turn the key all the way. But it kept happening, and I double-checked everything each night. It made no sense. I felt uneasy every morning. I'd walk into my small corner of the office, flick on the overhead light, and look straight at that drawer. The moment I saw it was even slightly ajar, I'd feel my heartbeat picking up. I'd yank the drawer open, confirm the contents were still there, and see that some of the documents had been shifted around or laid out on the desk. I started to get paranoid. My colleagues, Paul and Marcia, share the room next to mine. They never admitted to messing with my stuff, and I had no reason to think they'd gain anything from it. We all handled different segments of the company's paperwork. I tried asking around casually. I'd say, "Hey, did you notice anything weird in the office at night?" Or, "You guys hear the cleaning crew messing with things?" They only shook their heads. The cleaning crew usually comes around 9 p.m. They do their routine and they leave. I eventually spoke to the janitor. He insisted he never touched my drawers, and he had no reason to open them. He even let me check his ring of keys. None of them matched my drawer lock. That didn't help me relax, though. I still walked in each morning and felt a tightness in my chest every time I saw that unlocked drawer. I bought a small, inexpensive camera after the 3rd time this happened. I'm not a security expert. I just wanted something that could record overnight and hopefully show me who was messing around. The camera wasn't fancy. It recorded in color and had a motion sensor that would start recording when something moved in its field of view. I positioned it on top of a bookshelf that faces my desk. From that angle, you'd see the drawer and anyone who approached it. I thought that was enough. For 2 nights, nothing strange happened. I came in, found my drawer still locked, and let out a sigh of relief. Then, on the third morning, I walked in and found the drawer open again. Same story. Documents scattered, nothing missing. My throat went dry. I checked the camera. The battery was fine, and the camera was still on, but the footage for that night was frozen. It showed nothing after 2 a.m. It was like the camera had just stopped recording, and then it picked up again in the morning when I walked in. All I saw was a static image of my desk. No sign of anyone approaching. That gave me a chill. It felt like someone was mocking me, messing with the camera on purpose, making sure I wouldn't see who it was. The next night, I set up the camera again. I made sure it was properly charged and that the memory card had plenty of space. I even tested it after hours by waving my hand in front of it. The motion sensor seemed to work. Then I locked the drawer, triple-checked it, and went home. The following morning, the drawer was locked. I breathed a sigh of relief, but I was still tense. I checked the footage. Everything recorded smoothly, from the moment I left until I got in. There were a few random lights turning on and off in the hallway, probably from the cleaning crew. Nothing came near my desk. That night, I hoped the pattern of safety would continue. It didn't. The next morning, I walked in to see the drawer halfway open again. My pulse was pounding. I rubbed the back of my neck and felt sweat. The camera's battery was inexplicably drained. 0%. It didn't record anything. I never had battery issues with that camera before, but now it was dead. I plugged it into my laptop. The only files on the memory card were from the previous day. Nothing from that night. I felt anger rising in my chest. Something was off. It wasn't just a random coworker or a curious cleaning person. It was deliberate sabotage or something else. I tried to keep a level head. I told my boss, but he didn't believe it was a big deal. He said maybe the drawer was defective or maybe I'd been absent-minded. I told him I'd locked it carefully and had video proof of weird camera malfunctions. He shrugged. He said he'd ask building security to do a patrol. That wasn't enough for me. I decided to buy a better camera, one with a night vision feature and a more reliable battery. It cost me more than I wanted to spend, but I felt it was necessary. I also picked up a small external battery pack. My plan was to keep the camera plugged into that battery pack to ensure it wouldn't die on me. I set it all up the next evening. I told my coworkers I was doing an experiment with the camera for a personal project. I didn't want them to think I was accusing them. I placed the camera in a corner behind a stack of boxes so it wouldn't be too obvious. I made sure the lens had a clear view of my desk. I put a piece of tape over the tiny light that indicates the camera is on, hoping that would keep it hidden. Then I locked the drawer. I locked it so many times I felt stupid. I turned the key, pulled the drawer, confirmed it was secure. No movement. I left the office with a sense of dread. That night, I barely slept. My mind kept circling around the idea that maybe I'd come in the next day and see the drawer open again. I wanted to be wrong, but it felt inevitable. I woke up with a headache, got ready, and drove to work. My stomach was tight, like I was bracing for a punch. I unlocked the office door and I went straight for my desk. The drawer was open again. Papers were scattered. I stared at them. My throat felt dry and I could feel my heart pounding in my ears. I went to the camera. It was still there, still plugged into the battery pack. The battery pack was drained. The camera was turned off. I tried turning it on, but it wouldn't respond. I took a few deep breaths and reminded myself that no one was hurt and nothing was stolen. But I felt invaded, like there was no privacy. I could almost feel my hands shaking. I brought the camera home that evening, charged it fully, and checked the memory card on my computer. There was some footage from the early part of the evening. It showed me locking the drawer, adjusting things, and leaving. Then, around 1 a.m., and the recording just stopped. The last frame was normal. My desk was visible, the lights were off, and nothing was moving. Then it went black. No file corruption, no glitch. Just an abrupt end to the footage. That detail freaked me out. It was like someone had pulled the plug or yanked the battery, but everything was still connected when I got there. I felt my nerves on edge. My body was tense. I considered sleeping in the office, but I worried that might violate company policy, or at least raise uncomfortable questions. I also wasn't sure if I'd even catch whoever was doing this. What if I just ended up looking like a fool in front of my boss or the cleaning crew? Still, the next night I decided to stay late. I told the boss I had a lot of work to do on some complicated reports. He didn't mind. I was alone in the office by 10 p.m. The cleaning crew had come and gone. The building was quiet except for the occasional hum of the air conditioning. I didn't do much actual work. I kept the lights off, except for a small lamp near my desk. I locked the drawer. I set up the new camera again, this time inside a different nook, hidden behind a file organizer with only a tiny gap for the lens. Then I pretended to leave by turning off the lamp and stepping out for a few minutes. But I came back quietly and hid in the corner where the lights didn't reach. I sat there for hours. My back hurt after the first half hour. I tried not to shift too much. I kept an eye on the drawer. Nothing happened for a long time. I checked my phone. It was past midnight. My eyes felt heavy. The building was silent. There was no wind inside, no weird noises, just the low hum of the ventilation system. I wondered if I was wasting my time. Then, a little after 1 a.m., I heard a faint clicking sound. It was coming from the direction of my desk. I couldn't see clearly in the darkness, so I slowly stood up, leaning against the wall and tried to get a better look. The drawer was still locked. Then the desk itself vibrated slightly, like someone was rattling it. I strained my ears. My heart pounded so hard that I was worried I'd make noise just by breathing. I walked quietly, one step at a time, closer to the desk. The clicking sound became more rhythmic. It was like something was tapping the lock. There was no glow, no silhouette of a person. I saw a slight shift in the drawer handle. It moved as if someone was tugging on it from inside the desk. My chest felt tight. I was tempted to rush over and grab the handle, but I hesitated. I reached for my phone and tried to turn on its flashlight. As soon as I did that, the noise stopped. The handle went still. I stepped forward and pointed my phone's light at the drawer. It was closed. No sign of tampering. My mouth went dry and I stood there, my hands shaking. I waited a few more minutes, but nothing else happened. I wanted to open the drawer and check inside, but fear held me back. I was worried I'd break some weird tension. I finally forced myself to unlock the drawer. Everything looked normal. Papers were neatly stacked where I'd left them. I locked it again, tested it, and felt that it was secure. I tried to wait longer, but I felt too on edge. After another 30 minutes, I left. I locked the office behind me and went home. My nerves were fried. My head spun with confusion. It was as if I'd imagined that tapping sound, but I knew I heard it. When I got home, I could hardly sleep. My thoughts kept racing. Something had physically moved the drawer handle. I wasn't sure if it was a person or if I was going insane. But I'd stayed in the room, and I didn't see any person come in. The next morning, I returned to the office feeling sick. My stomach churned. When I stepped inside, the drawer was locked. I felt a small wave of relief. At least that night it stayed closed. But the camera was once again turned off. The battery was drained. I took out the memory card and connected it to my laptop. The footage ended around 1 a.m., right at the time I started hearing the clicking. Just like the other times, it suddenly cut off. Over the next few days, I tried to act normal. The drawer stayed locked a couple more nights, which let me breathe a little easier. But on a Wednesday morning, I arrived and found it open again. The same pattern, papers on the desk, nothing stolen, camera off, battery drained. I felt lightheaded and frustrated. I checked with the IT guy at work to see if there was any strange power surge or something that could affect the camera. He had no answers. At that point, I decided to stop caring if my boss thought I was nuts. I told him everything. I said I'd heard tapping on the drawer when I stayed late. I said the camera was always getting drained or freezing. He stared at me with a concerned look, like I might have been overworked. He said we could replace the drawer lock. Maybe I wanted to request a new desk. I agreed to try a new lock. The facilities manager came and installed a more robust lock the following day. He tested it, showed me the new key, and I thanked him. That night I set up the camera again with a fresh battery pack. I also hid a second camera across the room in case the first one got messed up. I didn't tell anyone about the second camera. I placed it inside a half-open cabinet with just enough space for the lens to see my desk. Then I left for the night. When I came in on Friday morning, the drawer was unlocked again. The brand new lock was obviously tampered with but not physically damaged. It was just undone. My desk was covered with those same papers. My heart sank. I felt a chill run through my back. I checked the first camera. Battery drained, device off. Then I went to the second camera, hidden in the cabinet. That camera's battery was also dead. I pulled the memory card, shaking my head in disbelief. I walked to my coworker Paul's desk. He was just settling in. I said, "Did you see anyone come in here last night?" He looked at me confused, said no, that he left around 6 p.m., and locked the office as usual. Marcia came in a few minutes later. I asked her the same question. She hadn't come back after hours either. I asked them if they heard any rumors about me or if they thought someone had a grudge. They both said no. They were just as baffled as I was. In a last attempt at logic, I checked the building's hallway cameras with security. The guard let me review the footage from the hallway leading to my office. There was no one entering after 9 p.m., except the cleaning crew. They stayed for 15 minutes, never even went near my office door. Then they left. After that, no movement. The hallway was empty the whole night. That was it. There was no explanation. I felt like I was losing my mind. But the evidence was right there on my desk each morning. It wasn't just a dream. The new lock wasn't enough to stop whatever was happening. I started to wonder if I was dealing with something beyond a simple prank. But I didn't have a rational answer. So far, no documents had been taken, no harm done aside from my shredded nerves. The boss decided to let me move to a different office. He said maybe it would help me relax. We also decided we'd store the most sensitive documents in a company safe for the time being. That way, even if someone opened my drawer, there'd be nothing valuable in there. I packed my stuff and left that desk behind. The new office is down the hall, near the windows. I still keep a lock on my drawers, but I haven't had any strange incidents since moving. It's been 2 weeks and my mornings are a lot calmer. I still think about what happened. Sometimes I catch myself glancing over my shoulder, expecting something to appear behind me. I can't explain it. The cameras never caught anyone. Nothing was stolen. Nobody confessed to messing around. Yet every time I tried to record it, the footage stopped. All I have are those scattered papers and that weird clicking noise in my head. I'm not sure what to believe, but at least it's over for now. If it starts again, I'll be ready to confront it. I keep a small flashlight in my pocket, along with a new recording device. Maybe one day I'll get a real answer. For now, I'll just keep locking my drawer and hope it stays closed when I come back in the morning. I never thought a simple door could make me sweat at 3 in the morning, but it did. It started with a slight rattle, then it escalated into a nightly event that kept me awake and unsettled. I wasn't staying in a haunted house or some creepy old mansion. I was just a regular guy who moved to a different city for work and had to find a cheap place to stay. The house belonged to a couple who seemed decent enough, and I only needed the room for a short period. At first, I thought everything would be fine. Then the doorknob started shaking every night around the same time. And that's when my sleep schedule took a nosedive. I moved in because my company sent me to that city for 3 months. My manager said it would be a quick contract job and then I'd be back home. I checked a few listings online and found this room. The rent was within my budget, and the house was close to the office. The couple who owned the house introduced themselves on the day I arrived. They were polite, but I got the feeling they were a bit distant. The wife showed me around. She pointed out the bathroom, the kitchen, and then my room. It was small, but I didn't need much space. There was a single bed, a small desk, a wardrobe, and a window facing the backyard. She said I could use the kitchen to cook simple meals, and if I had any problems, I could text her or her husband. She also mentioned that they often worked night shifts or late evenings. That explained why they wouldn't be around much. I nodded and thanked her. I just wanted to unpack and rest. My first night was quiet. I came home late after a long day at the new office. I ate a quick dinner at a fast food place nearby, then walked back and went straight to my room. I noticed the hallway was a bit dark, even with the light on. The floor creaked under my feet. I wasn't sure if that was normal or if something needed fixing. I got ready for bed, turned off the lights, and fell asleep. No problems. No weird sounds. I slept straight through until morning. I left for work feeling relieved that the place was peaceful. The couple had already left by the time I woke up, so I didn't see them before heading out. The second night was when I heard it for the first time. It was around 3 in the morning. At least that's what my phone said when I checked it. The doorknob rattled. It sounded like someone outside was trying to turn it back and forth. I sat up in bed, heart pounding. I listened for footsteps or voices, but everything else was silent. My throat felt dry. I stared at the door, wondering if maybe the couple had come home and were mistaken about which room was theirs. But it stopped after a few seconds. I got up, turned on the light, and opened the door. The hallway was empty. The house was quiet. I closed the door again, locked it, and tried to go back to sleep. My heart was still racing. I told myself it could have been the house settling or some weird draft. I eventually fell asleep again, but felt uneasy when my alarm went off a few hours later. I didn't say anything to the couple the next day. I actually didn't see them. I left for work early, and when I got back, the lights in their bedroom were off, so I assumed they had already left or were sleeping. The third night, it happened again. This time I had trouble falling asleep because I was expecting that noise. I stayed up until midnight reading some files for work. Then I forced myself to turn off the light and try to rest. I woke up abruptly to the same rattling sound, around 3 in the morning again. I felt my stomach clench. My palms got sweaty. I looked at the doorknob. It was clearly moving, but I couldn't see a silhouette under the door. No footsteps, no shadow, no voices. It made me think my eyes were playing tricks on me, but it was definitely moving. After a few seconds, it stopped. I got up, took a deep breath, and decided to throw open the door quickly. Maybe I'd catch whoever it was. I turned the knob fast and pulled the door open. The hallway light was off, and I only saw darkness. My eyes needed a moment to adjust, but I didn't hear anyone running away. I didn't hear doors closing. Nothing. I stepped into the hallway and felt a slight chill. I don't know if it was from the air conditioning or if my body was reacting to adrenaline. I tried the light switch, but the overhead light was out. It had worked the day before. Maybe the bulb died. That pissed me off a bit because it meant I couldn't see the hallway well. I stood there, straining my eyes and ears, but everything was silent. The house felt empty. I went back to my room, locked the door, and sat on the edge of my bed. My hands were shaking a little. I kept telling myself there had to be a logical explanation. Maybe the house had faulty wiring that caused vibrations. Maybe the doorknob was loose. I even thought about telling the couple about it the next day, but I doubted they'd have a quick fix for a rattling doorknob at 3 in the morning. I tried to calm down and eventually dozed off. But I felt tired at work the next day, and my focus was off. A few nights later, it got worse. I heard whispers outside my door. This was around the same time, maybe a little past 3. I was wide awake because I'd gone to bed early, and my body had adjusted to expecting something weird at that hour. At first it was faint, like someone having a conversation in another room. Then it got clearer, right on the other side of my door. I couldn't make out the words, but it sounded like 2 distinct voices, a low murmur, as if they were discussing something they didn't want me to hear. I got up and placed my ear against the door. My heart was beating so hard I felt it in my ears. The doorknob didn't move this time, but the whispering continued for a solid minute or 2. I started to think there might be actual people in the hallway messing with me. Could it be burglars or neighbors sneaking in? but nothing else in the house seemed disturbed. The rest of the hallway was always in darkness. The couple was never home around that hour, as far as I knew. After the whispering stopped, I waited a bit, then slowly opened the door. Again, the hallway was empty. I felt a shiver down my spine. I didn't see any open windows, and the front door was locked. I thought about turning on the living room lights, but I didn't want to roam around a house that wasn't mine in the middle of the night. I locked myself back in my room and lay in bed staring at the ceiling until morning. The next day, I decided I couldn't ignore this anymore. I had to talk to the couple. I caught them in the kitchen that evening. They were eating a quick dinner before heading out. I mentioned the rattling doorknob, the whispers, and the strange time that it all occurred. The husband gave me a weird look. Then he glanced at his wife. She looked a bit uncomfortable. She told me that an older relative of hers had passed away in that room some time ago. She said they hadn't had any problems with previous tenants, but maybe the place was carrying some residual energy. She didn't seem alarmed. She spoke calmly, like it was a normal thing. I felt a chill in my arms when she said it. I just stood there, staring. She said I could break the contract if it was bothering me that much, but I couldn't find another cheap place on such short notice. My job wasn't paying for a fancy hotel, and I only had a month left on my assignment. That conversation stuck with me. Learning someone had died in my room made everything worse. I kept replaying it in my head, especially at night when I was trying to sleep. I wondered if there was some strange presence, or if my imagination was going wild. Every time I heard a slight creak or a slight shift in the air, my nerves spiked. My mouth went dry, and I'd sit up, listening for footsteps. Some nights, there were no noises. Other nights, I'd hear the doorknob rattle for a few seconds. I'd sit there, frozen, not sure if I should jump up or pretend I was asleep. On one occasion, I forced myself to open the door immediately after hearing the rattle. Same result. Pitch black hallway, no one there. I could almost feel something watching me, but I never saw anything. My hair stood on end. The tension started affecting my daily life. I'd go to work drained. My coworkers noticed the dark circles under my eyes. They asked if I was sick or if I was having trouble adjusting to the new city. I just told them I was dealing with insomnia because of a new environment. I tried to go out more after work, hoping I'd be so tired that I'd sleep right through the night. Sometimes I stayed at a bar with colleagues until late, but even if I got home after midnight, I'd end up awake at 3, waiting for the doorknob to move or for the whispering to start. It was like my body was expecting it. My heart would pound so loudly I could hear it in my ears before anything even happened. Some nights I dozed off and woke up covered in sweat, not because of heat, but because I was dreaming about someone staring at me from the darkness near the door. I tried to do some small checks around the room. I tightened the screws on the doorknob and tested the lock. I even inspected the floorboards in the hallway. Nothing seemed out of place. Sometimes the corridor light worked. Other times it flickered or was off completely. I mentioned it to the couple in a text, and they said they'd replace the bulb, but it never got fixed. They spent most of their time out of the house, so I guess they forgot about it. I didn't push the issue too hard because I didn't want to seem paranoid. I was also embarrassed to say I felt scared at night because I heard noises. In my mind, it sounded childish. One night near the end of my stay, I heard the whispers again. They were clearer than ever. It was around the same time, just past 3. I had left the lamp on my bedside table turned on because I wanted some light. The voices sounded like they were talking about me. I couldn't catch actual words, but they were definitely whispering in my direction. My heart pounded. My scalp felt tight. I got up, grabbed my phone, and switched on the flashlight. I hesitated for a moment, but I opened the door. Nothing. Just emptiness. But the whispers continued for a few seconds even after I opened the door. It was like they were coming from the walls or from behind the thin air. Then they faded. I looked around the corridor, shining my phone's light in every corner. I walked to the living room, checked the locks on the front door, and stood there for a moment, feeling my breathing go fast. The house was cold, or maybe I was just shaking too much. I went back to my room, locked the door, and sat on the bed until sunrise. By the last week of my contract, I was counting down the days. I just wanted to leave that house. My job was almost done, and I planned to move back to my city the moment I signed the final paperwork. The couple never mentioned the noises again. They kept to themselves, and we barely crossed paths.